Another quick Enigma update. The machine's all in bits again. I've been reprinting parts, so I've redesigned and reprinted the tensioning device. This is what puts tension on the rotors to keep them in position. So I reprinted this part of it to make this a lot stiffer, a lot more solid, so when the spring pressure is on it, it doesn't twist that part. I've also reprinted the sides because I also changed the profile on the little lever. This goes on here, and this is what works against the tensioning device to move it out of the way so that you can actually get the rotors in and out. I've just made this a little bit wider, which meant reprinting this part because the position for the spring needs to be changed. When I took all of this apart, I discovered kind of a design flaw, or rather a flaw in my thinking, which was I've been using sort of dome head screws. Let's see. These kind of things. It'll focus on it. It doesn't like focusing that close. Oh, there we go. Mainly for aesthetic reasons. I just like the way they look. So they're sort of countersunk, or they go into a countersunk part. But what I've been finding with the 3D printed parts like this, using those kind of screws puts too much force on the part and it cracks. You can see there's a crack at the top there. So these are the little pieces that go on here that hold that tensioning device in place. Similar problem with the feet that hold this part on. If it'll focus again. There we go. I use the same screws there, and you can see it's cracked the part because when you do it up tight, of course, that angle on the bottom of the bolt head splits the part apart. So I'm reprinting those. That's what I've just printed there, and I'm just going to use flat head screws. And the problem is I've run out, so I've had to order more screws. They're on the way. I started looking at doing the wiring for the machine and discovered I don't have enough wire. So I've ordered more wire, and that's on the way. There's actually quite a bit of wiring inside the Enigma, as you would expect. So more wire should be on the way, hopefully arriving soon. I did realize that I could redesign this printed circuit board to make the wiring a bit easier. If I separated out these contacts a bit better, I could have one wiring loom going from the keyboard to the lamp board and one going from the keyboard to the plug board. But because of the way I've wired it up, that's going to have to be one loom rather than two. It just makes it a little bit fiddlier, but it's all doable. And once the machine's wired up, you're not going to be disconnecting it that often, hopefully. I've reprinted all the parts I need to do the next two rotors, so that is something I can do. I do still need to reprint one of these spacer rings. So at the moment I'm really just waiting for a lot of things. Waiting for the wiring, waiting for new nuts and bolts because I've run out of those, and I need to do 2 more diagrams for the next 2 rotors, and then I can also finish the last rotors 4 and 5 eventually as well. I only need 3 to test if the machine works. So the only other thing I have done is this PC is one I put together from junk to run the printer, and it's ancient. It's about at least 20 years old, so it's just far too slow. So I bought an ex-lease business machine, which is still about 10 years old, maybe a little bit less, but it's good enough for me to be able to run Fusion 360 in here as well as the printer. And that just means I don't have to run backwards and forwards to the house every time I want to modify a part and reprint it, which is what I was having to do before. So this machine can now run Fusion, so I can actually do the modeling in here. So I'm going to keep printing little parts tonight. I've discovered a few other parts have cracked. Um, this keycap here has actually split, so I need to reprint some of those. I might add a little bit of width to those just to make them a little bit stronger. It's the problem with plastic is it is rather weak, although that keyboard's been bashed around a bit, so I'm not too worried about that. I think that's it for tonight. Okay, I've got this machine back together again. Some of the nuts and bolts and things I ordered had turned up, so I was able to reassemble some of it. The strengthened up tensioning device works a lot better now. So you can see that I've modified the profile on this piece so that it actually pushes these a lot further out of the way, which makes it a lot easier to get the rotor stack in. It doesn't, the little wheels don't get in the way now. And I beefed up this piece so this isn't twisting now. I think I mentioned I'd also reprinted some of the parts, such as these little feet, because they've been cracking. And this shows how easy it is to go wrong on this machine. When I was fiddling around with the model and just changing things around a bit, what I've discovered now is the pawls aren't going up far enough to actually push the rotors around. They're not causing them to step. And it took me a little while to figure out what was going on. And it's because of these feet that I've reprinted. And you can barely see the difference, but if I try to line those up, you might notice that the hole on the one on the left is slightly higher than the one on the right. And this pivot point being slightly too low is what's causing the pawls not to lift up enough to move the rotors around. So somewhere along the lines in my modeling, I've messed up one of the dimensions. And now that I've got this computer set up in the lab, I can actually see what's gone wrong. This 19mm dimension needs to be measured to the bottom of the foot, not to the bottom of the base plate. So this hole on this model is fractionally too low. So I need to fix that and then reprint these, and that should give me the right amount of leverage again on the little pawls. So it's quite amazing that, you know, a millimetre or so difference down here, how much difference that makes on the machine. So I'm going to adjust that now. While I've been waiting for parts, I've been 3D printing a lot of bits. So I've been printing the different parts for the 5 rotors. These still need a little bit of cleanup, and I've been playing with the speed of my printer. So I've got the speed set at the 100% speed, and to get better quality prints I usually slow it down. And one of these was printed at 50% speed and the other one was 70% speed, and there's no difference between them. So I'm slowly tweaking the speed up until I can notice a difference in the print quality, and then I know what my sort of maximum trade-off between print speed and quality is going to be. So I'll redesign and reprint these. That shouldn't take too long, and hopefully that gets the machine working again. I'm not sure if I can get this in there. So you might be able to see, it's very hard to see, inside there. It won't focus on the little pawl that's in there, but you can see they don't go up enough to click the rotors around, so you can't move it. And like I say, that's entirely because this pivot point has gone down slightly. So I'll remodel that and fix that now. So that's fixed up now. It was just a matter of moving around one of the dimensions. The other good thing about having the new computer in the lab is I can my workflow is a lot easier because I can now just send the STL straight to the slicer. There's my part. Parts like this, you have to think which way round do you print them. So I could print it either flat on its face like that, or up that way. And sometimes you have to think about the layer strength. So I want to print it that way, so that most of the strength is in the bottom part here when it's bolted down. So I might as well print both at once. And we slice it. You can print directly from this as well, but I've actually got the server set up on the Raspberry Pi, so I tend to save these. What do I call them? And then I can upload them directly to here and then print from here. So I need to remember to take off what's already on the printer, of course, which was pretty easy. And I did figure out why the printer wasn't working so well the other day. It's because one of my leveling screws had actually come loose. So I've since adjusted things so that the screws are a lot tighter, and I moved the extruder down fractionally. This is the glue stick I'm using just to stick the prints to the glass. So that should be ready to print. Because before I was finding that I needed to give the keyboard quite a good thump to get these to click around to the next position, I've actually added an extra 1/4 millimeter onto the height here, just to see if that makes it fully click into position, in which case I don't need quite as strong springs in there. These aren't the strongest springs I've got in there at the moment. These are a little bit weaker. I've just noticed that this little wheel is a bit tight, it's not rotating, so I'll just loosen the screw off there. But the machine's getting better again, it's feeling a lot more solid. Okay, I've been reprinting parts, figuring out the best height for the pivot point here. You can see I've done a few experiments to try and get that exactly right. It's ended up, I think, 1.5 millimeters higher than I had originally modeled, but that's made the stepping far more reliable now. So that's really good, and I'm ready to start finishing the rotor wiring. But then I discovered I've made a mistake. So this is the first rotor I wired up, and I drew the little chart to help me, and the wiring is correct in terms of which letter goes to which, but the problem is I got the direction wrong. So it can be a little bit fiddly to get your mind around, but it does matter if you go A from the left to whatever on the right, as opposed to A on the right to whatever on the left. And that's where I went wrong. I wired effectively from left side to right side, and it needs to be from right side to left side, because this is the input side. So A on this side needs to go to, for rotor 1, E on this side, and I've done it the wrong way around. So A on this side is going to E on the rotor side, and they aren't the same thing. Really, I should have known better because I've dealt with this in software numerous times with different Enigma implementations. So I think I was just so focused on getting the actual letter pairings correct, I completely forgot about the direction. So I am going to print up a nicer version of this chart, one for each of the rotors, to make sure that I actually get it right. And then I'm going to have to take this apart, rewire it, which will be a little bit of a pain. And I've printed enough parts now for definitely 3 rotors. A little bit more printing and I'll have enough to do a whole set of 5. But definitely making progress. The tensioner bar across the back here is a lot better now. There's no twist on it. And the changed profile in there pushes these a lot further back. So it's now much easier to actually get the rotor stack into the machine. There's enough clearance there now to do that pretty easily. And the stepping seems a lot more reliable, as I mentioned. So I'm going to redo my little wiring diagrams, and then I'm not sure if I'll do the actual wiring today. It's a very fiddly job and it takes hours, and the weather today isn't too dreadful. I think it's supposed to rain this weekend, so doing the wiring, that's a nice indoors rainy day type activity where you can just sit down and focus on it and just do it. So I may leave that till tomorrow.